But Carly Simon comes in and she thinks the track is done. She thinks they're finished with it. And she comes in and sees Jim Gordon and Frank Zappa, and she has a hissy fit.
The unlikely story of the huge #1 hit You're So Vain by Carly Simon, which includes a lot of different characters. Producer Richard Perry, of course, Carly Simon, Jim Gordon, and believe it or not, Frank Zappa. We talked to Joel Selvin, author of a brand new book on drummer Jim Gordon. It's called Drums and Demons on Rock History Music. Jim Gordon was a professional drummer, born July 14, 1945. He was famous for being a very popular session musician and was known as a protege to drumming legend Hal Blaine. He played on some classic albums, like the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds. He was in studio with Paul Revere and the Raiders, as well as the Byrds and Judy Collins, and Frank Zappa. In 1970, he was part of Joe Cocker's Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour. He also toured with Traffic and was on 2 of their albums, including Low Spark of High Heel Boys. He was featured on Harry Nilsson's famous Nilsson Schmilsson. There was also Johnny Rivers, Art Garfunkel. Let's not forget he was on Steely Dan's album Pretzel Logic featuring Ricky Don't Lose That Number, and a few tracks on Alice Cooper's 1976 album Alice Cooper Goes to Hell. Gordon was one of the most prolific session drummers of the 1960s and 70s. He was known for his incredible versatility, and as mentioned, famous for playing on some of the biggest songs of those decades. He was born in Los Angeles and began drumming professionally as a teenager. He became a key figure in the Wrecking Crew group, the not-so-famous musicians who played on very famous hits. Let's revisit some of those hits. Layla with Derek and the Dominos. He was part of that band on their one and only studio album. Though he's given a co-write to Layla, there's a lot of conflicting stories that the piano coda in that song was actually written by Rita Coolidge. Then there's You're So Vain by Carly Simon. His drumming's really featured prominently on that 1972 hit that topped the charts in both the US and the UK. One of the most impressive guitar hits of all time has to be Classical Gas by Mason Williams. It's an instrumental, came out in '68, and was one of Gordon's early claims to fame. On that track, nothing but finesse drumming. As mentioned, Ricky Don't Lose That Number by Steely Dan. There was Wichita Lineman by Glenn Campbell, that famous Jimmy Webb song from '68. Again, very subtle drumming, yet essential for that ballad. It's known as one of the greatest country songs of all time. And the Albert Hammond hit from '72, It Never Rains in Southern California. And we'd be remiss if we didn't mention one of the greatest post-Beatle albums of all time by any member of that band, All Things Must Pass, with George Harrison, 1970. There was a dark side to Jim Gordon's life. In the 70s, possibly as early as the 60s, he started hearing voices, most notably his mother's voice. And eventually his condition worsened. Tragically, in 1983, he took his mother's life. He was convicted and sentenced to 16 years to life, though he stayed there for the rest of his life. He passed away in prison on March 13th, 2023. Though there are conflicting stories, it seems his schizophrenia was undiagnosed at the time of the crime. Jim Gordon, one of the greatest drummers of all time, and unfortunately overshadowed by that awful crime involving his mother. David Henschel told me something about Richard Perry. He says, called him a mad genius, of course, and you always have this picture of Richard Perry in front of a Studer or something, and having like a whole bunch of different, and he knows which every one of the takes that's over his shoulder or something. I'm not saying that happened, but people have this mad genius look at Richard Perry. He says, Henschel said, oh, the guy drove me crazy, but he was genius.
Perry was one of the first of the super obsessive producers that would drive artists into the 60, 70, 80 takes. I mean, he pulled Harry Nilsson by the nose through Without You. And I think it's like about 80 takes. And the finished vocal, which is clearly obviously a composite of like, I don't know how many parts, but it's an impossible vocal. It does things that you couldn't do if you were actually just singing it. And Harry hated the song too, by the way. And so that was all Perry just seeing. And here's Harry Nilsson, who was this brilliant, undiscovered artist who had a series of albums that everybody loved, but nobody had heard of him until Richard Perry made him sing Without You.
So was it Richard Perry who said he didn't dig the drums that were being put on You're So Vain, and then Jim Gordon's in town with Zappa for one night.
Yep. Called up to say hi, and Perry says, "What are you doing? Come down here right now."
And is it true Carly wasn't, she thought the song was finished and she saw Zappa came in too?
Yeah, Zappa came along to uh accompany Jim and just hang out for a little bit. I don't think he was there for long. But Carly Simon comes in and she thinks the track is done. She thinks they're finished with it. And she comes in and sees Jim Gordon and Frank Zappa, and she has a hissy fit. And Perry had to take her aside, and she cried and yelled and held her breath. But Perry wasn't impressed. He was going to get Jim Gordon to cut these drum tracks.
You've said about Jim that You're So Vain is like one of his greatest pieces of all time. And it's interesting, Andy Newmark, younger at that time, was able to think on conscious or unconscious, a good idea is a good idea no matter where it came from, and just kind of use it as a learning session, as you said before.
I think that's Andy's character. Andy was the first person I spoke to about on this book. And I talked to Andy when I was trying to research the proposal, because he has an account of playing that session out on the internet. And I read that and contacted him and talked to him about it. And he's just a very studious, straightforward, down-to-earth guy. I think that's just in his character, to see this as a learning opportunity, not as a job he lost. But he'd already watched some other guy cut the drum track that he did the first time. Some British session player came in and took a crack at it. And the fact is, that's a masterpiece drum part. What Jim did, I don't think other people could have done. It is something that bespeaks the Jim Gordon's four drum style, as opposed to like Hal Blaine Monster Kid or something. He gets all that thunder out of four drums, right? Amazing. And the approach is so, how do you want to say, compositional. Okay, it's not a drum part. It is a piece of the composition. It serves the whole piece. And yeah, it's a great scene in the book, thanks to Andy Newmark, because Jim came in after two people had tried it. They've been working on this track a week. He comes in, and in one night, 60 takes 4 hours, he puts this thing on the top of the charts. And everybody knew it. And it's a real sort of heroic moment for Jim. But it survives. I mean, that record wouldn't be what it is without the drum part. And Perry knew that. Richard Perry, the producer, he knew that.
Yeah, I like that chapter on Gene Krupa and that phase. Because I talk to a lot of drummers, and of course, Gene Krupa comes up an awful lot in when we're
I had no idea how important a role Krupa played in designing the modern drum set. That was news to me, and I knew stylistically what he'd done for drums, but that he'd actually designed the cymbals and the kit, and that all was news. But yeah, he was this incredible definitional figure of this modern American instrument, the contraption drum set. And he was the one who constructed the initial vocabulary and created the template for everything that was going to follow. And it was years and years and years before they broke that template.
Who surprised you the most when you interviewed them? Who was the biggest surprise of anyone you've interviewed?
Sam the Sham.
Why?
His name's Sam Samudio, and he had an album out called Sam Hard and Heavy, and he did a promo tour. This would be about 72, 73, and he was with a promo man named Mario Medias, who was known as the Magnificent M. And these two guys showed up in town at a hotel room, and I went over to do a little newspaper article. And I was unprepared for the caliber of characters that I was meeting up with. The Super M was just incredible, and Sam was an amazing guy. He was funny, he was smart, he was talented. He got it, and he told me that the second time he went to Nashville, he drove up from Texas, and he parked his car, and he reached around and started to pull his guitar out of the back seat. And he heard somebody laugh. And he looked across the street, and there was a guy in the back of a garbage truck, up to his waist in garbage, laughing at him. And he said, I took one look at that, and I put the guitar back and went home to Texas.
Make sure you comment on our videos, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos. If you want to make a donation to the channel, there's a PayPal link. Also, join our Patreon. You'll get early access to our videos. And we have a swag store where you can buy a Rock History Music t-shirt, cap, and all kinds of different swag with our logo on it. Subscribe to our channel, share our videos, and comment on them. I'm John Bowden. This is Rock History Music. Take care of yourself.